Captain Adam Stark stood at the helm of the Aurora, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space outside the viewing window. The ship had been on a routine mission to survey uncharted planets when something unexpected appeared on their radar. A small, unidentified vessel, weak and drifting, had entered the system. It wasn't much bigger than a standard shuttle, yet its distress signal was unmistakable. "Captain, we've got a problem," Lieutenant Mara Reynolds said, her voice tense. She was monitoring the ship's sensors, her brow furrowed in concentration. "That vessel's readings are off the charts. It's not human, and it's barely functional. If we don't help them, they'll be gone in a matter of hours." Adam rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He had never seen anything like it before. But space was full of mysteries, and Adam Stark was known for his curiosity. He was a man who couldn't leave another soul stranded, no matter their species. "Prepare a rescue team. We're going down to check it out," Adam ordered, his voice steady. The crew quickly mobilized. Adam grabbed his gear and made his way to the shuttle bay, where a small team of officers was already waiting. Among them was Dr. Rachel Tan, the ship's medical officer. She had a sharp mind and a quick hand, both of which would be needed for whatever they might find. Minutes later, they were in the shuttle, descending toward the surface of the desolate moon where the alien ship had crashed. Adam glanced at his crew. They were all focused, but there was a clear sense of unease. None of them knew what to expect. The surface of the moon was bleak and barren. Thick clouds of dust swirled in the low gravity, giving the landscape a strange, ghostly appearance. They landed near the wreckage of the alien ship, which was little more than a smoldering heap of twisted metal. There was no sign of life on the surface until they heard a faint cry. Adam's heart skipped a beat. It was a baby's cry. "Over there." Rachel pointed, her voice filled with urgency. "That structure. There's movement." Adam didn't hesitate. He led the team through the wreckage, carefully navigating around twisted debris. The cry grew louder as they approached a small, collapsed building. Inside, hidden beneath the wreckage, was a mother and child. The mother, an alien with pale green skin and delicate, multi-limbed features, lay unconscious but alive. In her arms, she held a tiny infant, its body barely moving, its skin a lighter shade of green. Adam knelt beside them, assessing the situation quickly. The mother was alive but injured. The baby, on the other hand, was in critical condition, pale and barely breathing. The air was thin and the temperature was dangerously low. Without help, neither would survive. "We need to get them back to the ship now," Adam ordered, his voice urgent. "Rachel, can you stabilize them?" Dr. Tan knelt beside the mother, scanning her vitals with a portable medical device. "I can do what I can, but they need advanced care, and fast. We don't have much time." Adam turned to his crew, his eyes scanning each face. "We're getting them to safety. Let's move." The crew worked quickly to carefully lift the mother and child, placing them into a makeshift medical stretcher. Adam stayed close, his protective instincts kicking in. As they made their way back to the shuttle, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. These two creatures, strangers in every sense of the word, were now depending on him and his team for survival. The journey back to the Aurora was tense. The shuttle shook under the weight of the atmosphere as they made their ascent, and Adam's mind raced. He had no idea who these aliens were, where they came from, or why they had been stranded. All he knew was that it didn't matter. They needed help, and he was the one to give it. As they boarded the Aurora and made their way to the medical bay, Adam stayed close to the mother and child. Dr. Tan immediately went to work, using advanced human medical technology to stabilize them both. The mother's breathing became more regular, and the baby, though still weak, began to show signs of life. For the first time in hours, Adam allowed himself to breathe. But as he stood there, watching the two aliens, so fragile and vulnerable, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning of something far more complicated. The alien mother stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. Her gaze locked onto Adam, and despite the confusion and fear in her alien eyes, there was a hint of recognition. A silent understanding passed between them. Adam wasn't sure what it meant, but something told him that their paths had crossed for a reason. And whatever that reason was, it was just beginning. The Aurora's medical bay hummed with quiet efficiency as Dr. Rachel Tan worked tirelessly to stabilize the alien mother and her child. Adam Stark stood at the doorway, his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He couldn't stop thinking about how fragile they both were. The mother, Malira, had awoken briefly after the medical procedures began, her eyes wide with fear as she looked around. But once she saw Adam, there was a flicker of recognition, followed by a strange mix of trust and confusion. "How are they doing?" Adam asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Rachel looked up from her instruments, wiping sweat from her brow. "The mother is stable for now. I've managed to stabilize her injuries, but she's weak. The baby, it's touch and go. We've got him hooked up to a breathing apparatus, but he's not out of danger yet." Adam nodded, his heart heavy. He had never expected to find himself in a situation like this, especially not with aliens. He had always been a man of action, quick to make decisions on the battlefield. But this was different. These creatures were not enemies. They were in need of help, and Adam felt a responsibility to see them through this crisis. He took a deep breath and walked over to the medical table, where Malira lay. Her green skin shimmered faintly under the artificial lights of the ship. Her features were delicate and foreign to him, but there was something deeply human about the way she clutched her child protectively. "Malira," Adam said gently, using the name he had learned from the ship's translator. "You're safe now. We're going to get you and your baby home." Malira's eyes flickered toward him, and for a moment he saw a strange mixture of gratitude and sadness in her gaze. She tried to speak, but her words were broken and strained. Adam couldn't understand her language, but he could feel the emotion in her tone. Rachel stepped in, her voice calm and reassuring. "She's trying to communicate. It's going to take some time, but she'll be able to understand us soon." Adam nodded. The situation was far from ideal, but he couldn't afford to waste time. They needed to leave the moon and get to a safer location before any more threats showed up. He glanced at the window, watching the distant stars. A new question formed in his mind. Who were these aliens, and what had brought them to the edge of this barren world? The answer would have to wait. For now, Adam's priority was keeping them alive. Hours passed, and as the ship continued its course, the crew worked on getting the Aurora back into a stable orbit. Meanwhile, Adam spent his time by Malira's side, offering what comfort he could. He had no idea if she even understood the words he was saying, but he couldn't help himself. He wanted her to know that she and her child were no longer alone. It wasn't long before Malira's breathing became more regular, and her eyes grew less clouded with pain. The medical team had done their best, but Adam couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. It felt like the calm before a storm. He was right. As they passed the outer rings of the planet, the ship's sensors suddenly picked up a strange signal, a distorted transmission that seemed to be coming from somewhere nearby. Adam's instincts kicked in immediately. Something wasn't right. "Lieutenant Reynolds," Adam called out, turning to his second in command. "What's going on with that signal?" Reynolds worked quickly at the console. "It's coming from a ship, one that's not human. It's broadcasting on an emergency frequency. They're too close for comfort, Captain. This could be trouble." Adam's heart raced. "Get us to full speed. Now." Reynolds nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. The ship shuddered as it increased speed, but Adam's mind was already elsewhere. The signal could mean only one thing. Another ship, likely the one that had been after Malira and her child. The alien faction that had been hunting them was closing in. "All hands, prepare for potential contact," Adam ordered, his voice steady but urgent. I need full readiness. Let's not give them any room to maneuver." The crew quickly moved into position, and Adam returned to the medical bay. Malira had fallen asleep, her body exhausted from the ordeal. Adam knelt beside her, his thoughts racing. How much longer could they outrun whatever was after them? A sudden beeping from the console interrupted his thoughts. It was a warning from the ship's long-range scanners. "They found us," Reynolds said over the intercom. "They're entering our radar range." Adam's mind raced. There was no way they could outrun these attackers, not unless they made a move, and fast. "We can't run forever," he muttered to himself. He turned to Rachel, who was still working over the baby. "We need to take action." Rachel nodded grimly. "I'm almost done here. The baby's stable, but I can't keep him alive for long without proper medical care. And if we're going to escape, we need to prepare for whatever comes next." Adam glanced at the small, fragile creature in Rachel's care. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting these beings who had no place in this dangerous universe. Adam had already risked so much to save them, and now he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. "We're not going anywhere without them," Adam said firmly. "Make sure they're ready." The ship's systems hummed around him as Adam prepared for whatever lay ahead. He didn't know how long they could survive in the face of this new threat, but he would be damned if he didn't try. As the days passed, the Aurora moved deeper into the galaxy, steadily making its way toward the nearest human colony. The crew remained vigilant, always ready for the unexpected, but the threat they had feared never materialized. The alien ship that had tracked them down seemed to have lost their trail, leaving them with a brief moment of peace. Captain Adam Stark found himself spending more time in the medical bay than he had ever anticipated. His thoughts kept drifting back to Malira, the alien mother. Though he had rescued her and her child out of duty, something inside him began to shift. He didn't know if it was her vulnerability, her strange beauty, or the silent bond that had begun to form between them. But Adam felt more connected to her than he could explain. Malira had grown stronger since their first encounter. Her green skin had taken on a healthier tone, and her eyes, which had once been clouded with fear and confusion, now held a quiet gratitude. She had not spoken much, her language still foreign to Adam's ears, but she understood more than he had first thought. There were moments when their gazes met, and in those moments, words didn't seem necessary. Adam spent hours with her, trying to communicate, trying to make her feel at ease. Rachel, the ship's medical officer, had taught him a few basic signs in the alien language, but it was slow going. Still, Adam was determined. He knew that if they were going to survive in this vast, unfamiliar universe, communication was key. One evening, as the stars glided by the windows of the medical bay, Adam found Malira sitting by her child's bedside. The baby, now stable and breathing on its own, was asleep in a small, specially designed crib. Malira watched over the child, her eyes soft and caring. The sight of her tenderness struck Adam deeply. "Your baby is getting better," Adam said quietly, though he wasn't sure if she could understand him fully. He had seen the way her eyes would flicker to the baby whenever she was worried. There was a strong connection there, something Adam knew he could never truly comprehend, not with his own human experience. Malira turned to look at him, her gaze full of gratitude. She reached out a hand, a tentative motion that seemed both hesitant and hopeful. Adam hesitated for a moment, then took her hand gently in his. There was a quiet moment of understanding between them. "You're safe here," Adam reassured her. He didn't know what would come of this situation, but he was committed to helping her, to helping them. He had never imagined his life would take such an unexpected turn, but here he was, standing beside an alien mother and her child, feeling something stirring within him. Rachel entered the room, interrupting the quiet moment. "Captain, I've finished with the medical checks. Malira's vitals are stabilizing, and the baby is doing much better. We should be out of danger for now." Adam nodded but didn't look away from Malira. He could feel the bond between them growing, a bond that felt like more than just a shared struggle for survival. It was something deeper, something that was hard to explain. He didn't know what it meant yet, but it was there. As Rachel left the room to give them some privacy, Adam and Malira were left alone once again. He sat down beside her, unsure of what to say. The silence between them was comfortable, but Adam couldn't help but feel that Malira was trying to tell him something. It was in the way she looked at him, the way her eyes softened when she saw him with her child. You want to thank me, don't you?" Adam said softly. He had never been good with words, especially not in moments like this, but he felt like he had to say something. He had rescued her, yes, but now there was something more to it. Something unspoken. Malira's eyes filled with emotion. She nodded slowly, as if trying to find the right way to express herself. Then, in a quiet voice, she spoke for the first time in days. Her words were foreign, but the tone was unmistakable. Adam blinked, surprised. He didn't understand her language, but the emotion was clear. Malira wasn't just thanking him. She was offering something more, something Adam wasn't sure he was ready to accept. "Are you offering something?" Adam asked carefully. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but his instincts told him this wasn't just gratitude. There was a deeper connection forming between them, one that he couldn't deny. Malira's eyes held his for a long moment, and then slowly she placed her hand over her chest, then reached out to touch his arm. It was an invitation, but one that left Adam uncertain. Her gesture spoke of something more intimate, something that went beyond friendship or simple survival. She was asking for more than just protection. She was asking for a family. Adam's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure how to respond. He was human. She was alien. There were so many questions, so many barriers between them. Yet, he couldn't deny the pull he felt, the way she had trusted him with her life and the life of her child. As Adam looked at her, he realized that this situation was changing him in ways he never expected. There was no going back now. He had already chosen to protect Malira and her child, but what about the future? What about the path they would walk together? Malira wasn't just offering thanks. She was offering a chance at something neither of them had expected, something that could change both their lives forever. Captain Adam Stark sat at the helm of the Aurora, his fingers absently tapping the controls as he stared out into the endless expanse of space. The stars seemed so distant, so cold. Yet here, on this ship, everything had changed. He had made decisions before, important decisions, but none like this. None that felt so personal. Behind him, in the medical bay, Malira and her child had found a semblance of peace. The baby, though still fragile, was growing stronger by the day, and Malira was adjusting to her new surroundings, her once terrified eyes now filled with curiosity and hope. But there was still a wall between them, one Adam wasn't sure how to break down. He wasn't blind to what was happening. The bond between him and Malira had been growing ever since their rescue, and every day it seemed to deepen. It wasn't just the gratitude that she felt toward him, though that was certainly there. It was something more, something Adam wasn't sure how to name. But as much as he felt drawn to her, he knew there were things that couldn't be ignored. She was an alien. Her species was unknown, and they had no idea what kind of dangers might lie ahead. What would happen if they returned to human space and people found out about her child? He let out a slow breath. The risks were high, but he wasn't the kind of man to turn his back when someone needed him. And that's how he saw it. Malira and her baby needed him. Turning from the controls, Adam walked into the medical bay, where Dr. Rachel Tan was performing routine checks. The hum of medical equipment filled the room, but Adam's focus was on the two beings that had come to mean so much to him. Malira was sitting quietly beside her child, her hands gently brushing over the baby's skin, speaking in soft, melodic tones. Adam still didn't understand her language, but he could hear the affection in her voice. Rachel glanced up as Adam entered. "Captain, she's recovering well." The baby's doing better every day. But I'm concerned, sir. Adam raised an eyebrow. Concerned? About what? It's the unknown, Rachel said, lowering her voice. We don't know where she came from, or what dangers we might face if someone comes looking for her. What if there's a bigger threat out there? Adam sighed. He had thought about that too. We've already made it this far. I'm not going to leave her behind. Rachel hesitated before speaking again. I understand. But you have to remember, this is more than just a rescue mission now. She's starting to depend on you. And the bond you're building with her, it's becoming more complicated. You might be walking into something much bigger than you realize. Adam's eyes drifted to Malira, who was now looking at him, her eyes full of a silent understanding. He had always been a man of action, but this was different. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. He couldn't turn away now. Days turned into weeks, and Adam found himself at a crossroads. He was no longer just the captain of a ship on a rescue mission. He was becoming a part of something bigger, something he hadn't fully understood until now. Malira's presence on the ship had begun to change things. The crew had been cautious at first, unsure of how to interact with the alien mother and child. But as time passed, they saw the same thing Adam had seen. The quiet strength in Malira's eyes, the protective instinct she had for her baby. The crew had slowly come to accept them. And now, there were whispers among the ranks. It wasn't just Adam who had changed. The Aurora herself had taken on a new energy. The crew had rallied around Malira and her child, taking turns caring for them when Adam couldn't. In return, Malira had shared small moments with the crew, offering glimpses of her world through gestures, her soft voice, and the strange melodic sounds of her language. Adam couldn't help but feel a sense of unity forming, something he hadn't experienced in years. One evening, as the ship drifted closer to the human colony, Adam returned to the medical bay. Malira was standing by the window, her gaze fixed on the stars. Her baby, now alert and curious, was in her arms. The two of them looked so peaceful, so in tune with each other. Adam entered quietly, unsure of what to say. His mind was racing with thoughts about the future. He didn't know what would happen once they reached the colony. Would they be accepted? Would people fear them? Malira turned when she heard his footsteps, a soft smile forming on her lips. She held the baby up to Adam, an unspoken invitation. Adam approached slowly, unsure but willing. As he took the baby in his arms, the small creature cooed, its eyes wide and innocent. There was something so pure about it, something that reminded him of the innocence he had once taken for granted. For a moment, Adam was lost in the moment. It wasn't just about saving them anymore. It wasn't about duty or responsibility. He felt something stir deep within him, something that felt right, even though he couldn't explain it. You've come a long way, Adam said softly, his gaze meeting Malira's. She nodded, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Slowly, she stepped forward, gently touching his hand. There was no need for words between them. In that moment, they both understood. No matter what happened next, they had become something more than strangers. They had become a family. Adam took a deep breath, holding the baby carefully. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. This was just the beginning of something new, and whatever lay ahead, he would face it with Malira and her child. The Aurora was now on the final stretch of its journey to the human colony. The familiar hum of the ship's engines was a steady backdrop to the thoughts that weighed heavily on Adam Stark's mind. He had never been one to dwell on the future. Life had always been about the here and now, the next mission, the next objective. But now, with Malira and her baby on board, everything felt different. He looked out the viewports at the stars ahead. So vast, so infinite. The colony was a few days away, but Adam had no idea what to expect once they arrived. Would the human authorities accept Malira and her child, or would they see them as a threat? The unknown stretched before him like a dark, uncertain path. Still, He couldn't turn back. He had made a choice when he pulled Malira and her baby from that wreckage, and it was a choice he would stand by, no matter what. In the medical bay, Malira had made remarkable progress. Her strength had returned, and her bond with her child was unshakable. Adam had spent hours with them, trying to learn more about Malira's world. She had shared fragments of her life with him, stories of her home planet, her people, and the trials they had faced. Her language was still a mystery, but the emotions behind her words spoke volumes. The baby, whose name Adam still hadn't learned, was now crawling around in the small space by Malira's side. The little one was curious and playful, reaching out for anything in sight. Adam couldn't help but smile as the child's bright eyes locked onto his, full of wonder and innocence. "Is it really going to be okay?" Rachel's voice broke through Adam's thoughts as she entered the room. She was holding a data pad, her expression thoughtful. "You've been quiet lately. We're almost at the colony." Adam turned to face her, forcing a smile. "Yeah, almost there. But that's the thing, Rachel. We don't know what's going to happen when we get there. The people at the colony, they're not going to just welcome Malira with open arms. We're dealing with something unknown here." Rachel looked at the baby, then back to Adam. "I get it. But, Captain, you've done more for them than anyone could have. We all have. We don't know what the future holds, but we can only do our best. Right?" Adam nodded slowly. Rachel was right. There was no way to predict how the humans would react to an alien, let alone a child. But he wasn't about to abandon Malira now. He had already come too far, and their bond had grown stronger than he could have imagined. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and Adam turned to see Malira standing by the doorway. She was more confident now, moving gracefully despite her earlier weakness. Her eyes met Adam's, and she gave him a soft smile. There was something in that smile, something unspoken, that made Adam's heart race. "Malira," Adam greeted, his voice gentle. "Are you feeling all right?" She nodded, her eyes focused on him. Then, with a movement that surprised him, she reached out toward him, her hand gently brushing his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with him, and Adam's breath caught in his throat. "Thank you," Malira said in her melodic language. Her voice was soft, yet there was a depth to it that Adam couldn't ignore. The translation device on his wrist buzzed, and the words appeared on the screen. "I'm glad you're okay," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't sure if she understood, but the sincerity in his tone seemed to communicate more than words ever could. Malira's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, and then she moved closer, placing her child in Adam's arms. The baby cooed softly, its little hands grasping at Adam's shirt. The moment felt surreal. Adam, a human soldier, holding an alien child in his arms, was suddenly struck by a sense of calm. He had no idea what was coming next, but right then, everything felt right. As the baby reached up, touching his face, Adam's heart swelled. There was no denying it. This was no longer just about saving lives. This was about building something, creating a future that neither he nor Malira had ever imagined. A future where their bond could evolve, no matter the challenges they might face. "What now?" Rachel asked, breaking the silence again. She watched as Adam held the baby, her voice tinged with concern. "Once we reach the colony, we have to figure out what to do with them. We can't keep them on the Aurora forever. People will ask questions." Adam looked at Rachel, then at Malira, who was standing by, her eyes waiting for an answer. He felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there," Adam replied firmly. "For now, I'm focused on keeping them safe. No matter what the future holds, I'm not leaving them behind." Rachel didn't respond immediately, but she gave him a nod of understanding. "I respect that, Captain. But you need to remember, there's more at stake here than just one alien mother and child. We don't know how this could affect the rest of the universe. If word gets out that we found a peaceful alien species, there could be Consequences. Adam clenched his jaw. The stakes were higher than he had imagined, but he had already made his choice. He wasn't going to let fear stop him from doing what he believed was right. "We'll deal with that when the time comes," Adam said, his voice steady. "For now, we have a responsibility to Malira and her child, and we will protect them, no matter the cost." Malira stepped forward, her hand gently resting on Adam's arm. She looked at him with a mixture of trust and something deeper, something that told him she had already accepted him into her world. And in that moment, Adam knew. He wasn't just their protector anymore. He was part of their family. The Aurora dropped out of warp, and the colony station came into view, a vast ring of metal and glass floating in the silence of space. It was a familiar sight for Adam, a place where soldiers, civilians, and researchers coexisted in harmony. But today, it felt different. The presence of Malira and her child, the alien mother and her fragile infant, turned the ordinary into something much more complicated. Captain Adam Stark stood at the helm of the ship, his eyes fixed on the station as it grew larger in the viewfinder. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the uncertainty of what would happen once they arrived. Would they be welcomed? Or would Malira and her child be seen as a threat? Behind him, the crew of the Aurora was busy with preparations for docking. Rachel Tan, the ship's medical officer, was monitoring Malira's health closely, ensuring she was stable enough for the journey ahead. The last thing they needed was for Malira to suffer from the stress of what was to come. Adam took a deep breath and turned to Rachel. "How's she doing?" Rachel glanced at the medical monitor. "Better than expected. The baby's stable, and Malira's holding up well. But we need to be cautious. We don't know what kind of reactions we'll get once we land." "I know," Adam said, his voice heavy with the weight of his thoughts. "But we've come this far. I'm not turning back now." Rachel gave him a supportive nod. "I know you're doing what you think is right. Just be prepared. It could get messy." Adam appreciated Rachel's concern, but he wasn't about to let fear dictate his actions. He had made a promise to protect Malira and her child, and he intended to keep it. As the Aurora docked at the station, Adam stood in the airlock, his heart pounding. He had no idea what was waiting for them on the other side. Would the colony authorities accept Malira? Would they question her presence, or worse, treat her as an enemy? The unknown stretched before him like a vast chasm, and Adam could feel the tension building. Rachel stood beside him, her face calm but with a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steady. "As ready as I'll ever be." Adam replied, his voice low. The airlock hissed as it opened, revealing the sterile, bright hallways of the station. A group of uniformed officers stood waiting, their expressions neutral but unreadable. Adam could tell that they were prepared for something, though whether it was a welcoming or hostile reception, he wasn't sure. As Adam stepped forward, Malira and her child followed close behind. The officers' eyes immediately locked onto the alien mother, their gazes scrutinizing her every movement. Adam felt a surge of protectiveness rise within him. Malira had been through so much already. The last thing she needed was to feel threatened again. The lead officer, a tall woman with short, dark hair, stepped forward. "Captain Stark," she said, her voice even, "we've been informed of your mission. You've brought an alien aboard your ship, and we need to question her." Adam stood tall, his chest swelling with a mixture of pride and determination. "This is Malira," he said, motioning to the alien mother. "And this is her child. They are not a threat. They are in need of protection." The officer didn't flinch but gave him a stern look. "We can't take chances. You understand the importance of security. The colony can't afford any risks." Adam's jaw tightened. "I understand. But I'm telling you, she's not a threat. She's just trying to survive." There was a long silence as the officers exchanged glances. Adam could feel the weight of their scrutiny, but he stood firm. He wasn't backing down now. Finally, the officer nodded, her expression softening. "We'll need to take her for questioning. It's standard procedure, but we'll make sure she and the child are treated with respect." Adam's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this. He had hoped for a warm reception, a recognition of their humanity. But it seemed that the fear of the unknown was greater than he had anticipated. Still, he wasn't going to let them take Malira without a fight. "I'll accompany her," Adam said firmly. "If anyone's going to question her, it should be me." The officer raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. "Very well. But understand that this is a matter of security. We need to make sure we aren't bringing something dangerous into our colony." Adam nodded, knowing that there was little more he could say. "I'll be with her every step of the way." The next few hours were tense. Malira and her child were escorted to a small, sterile room, where they were questioned by a group of officials. Adam stood nearby, his presence a silent protection. He could see the fear in Malira's eyes as she was questioned in an unfamiliar language, though he knew she wasn't truly understanding everything. The baby, meanwhile, was quiet in her arms, a beacon of innocence amid the uncertainty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the questioning was over. The officials were still wary, but they seemed convinced that Malira wasn't a threat, at least for now. Adam couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from resolved. They had only just begun. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Malira's eyes met Adam's, her silent gratitude clear. She had come to trust him in ways that words could not describe. And Adam? He had come to understand that this journey, this strange and unexpected bond, was more than just a duty. It was a purpose. In the quiet of their room, Malira gently placed her child in Adam's arms once more. The baby looked up at him with innocent eyes, and Adam smiled softly. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for now, he knew one thing. He would protect them, no matter the cost. The days after the questioning felt like a blur. Adam Stark couldn't shake the tension that lingered in the air. The officers at the colony station had allowed Malira and her child to stay, but there was still a sense of uncertainty. The colony's leaders had agreed to keep their presence under wraps for now, but Adam knew it wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the truth would come out, and they would have to face whatever came next. The first few nights in the colony were quiet. Adam and Malira stayed in a small, secure living space on the station, where Rachel and the rest of the crew could keep an eye on them. Malira had settled into a routine, and though she still had trouble communicating, she seemed more comfortable than before. The baby, growing stronger each day, had become the center of attention for the crew. Adam found himself spending more time with the small family, growing closer to them in ways he never expected. Despite the unease he felt, Adam knew that they had made the right decision by bringing them here, but he couldn't ignore the nagging worry that they were living on borrowed time. What would happen if the truth about Malira's origins spread? Would they be able to protect her and the baby from those who might see them as a threat? One evening, as Adam walked through the station's halls, he found himself lost in thought. The hum of the colony station was calming, but the weight of responsibility was always there. His path had never been so unclear, and the future seemed full of more questions than answers. What if the colony turned against them? What if the galaxy's government saw the discovery of an alien race as an opportunity to seize power? The risks were growing with each passing day. "Captain Stark," a voice interrupted his thoughts, and Adam turned to see a familiar face. Lieutenant Carafiels, one of the senior officers on the station. She looked around cautiously before approaching. "Lieutenant," Adam greeted, raising an eyebrow. "What's on your mind?" She glanced over her shoulder, making sure no one was watching. "I've been hearing whispers," Kara said quietly. "People are starting to talk about Malira. Some think it's a mistake to let her stay here. There's concern. People are worried about what the government will say." Adam felt his chest tighten. He knew it was only a matter of time before the rumors spread, but hearing them out loud made the situation feel real. He had expected this, but it didn't make it any easier. "I've already told them," Adam said firmly. Malira and her child are not a threat. They are in need of protection, and that's what we're giving them. If anyone has a problem with that, they can speak to me." Karen nodded but didn't look convinced. "I hope it doesn't come to that, sir. But we need to be careful. You can't protect them forever if the entire colony turns against them." Adam sighed. He had been preparing for this moment, but it didn't make the weight any lighter. "I'll keep an eye on things, but we're doing what's right. I won't back down." As Kara walked away, Adam's resolve hardened. He had already made the decision to protect Malira and her child, and he wasn't about to let fear or uncertainty change that. He would face whatever came next, no matter how difficult. That evening, Adam returned to his quarters. Malira was sitting by the window, her eyes distant as she gazed out at the stars. The baby was sleeping in her arms, a peaceful expression on its face. It seemed so small, so fragile, and yet there was an unspoken strength in the way Malira held her child, a strength that Adam admired deeply. He sat down beside her, his presence quiet and comforting. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence was soothing, a rare moment of calm in the midst of all the uncertainty. Adam knew that Malira didn't fully understand everything happening around her, but she trusted him in a way that made his heart ache, with a mix of responsibility and tenderness. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Malira turned to him. She didn't say anything, but her eyes spoke volumes. It was the same look she had given him ever since they had first met, an expression of gratitude, but also of something deeper, something Adam couldn't quite place. Adam reached out and gently touched her hand. He wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, he knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone anymore. And neither was Malira. "You're not alone," Adam said softly, his voice barely a whisper. "You and your child, you're safe here." Malira's gaze softened and she nodded. She didn't need to speak. Her eyes said everything. But the silence was broken when the baby began to stir, a soft cry filling the room. Malira gently rocked her child, calming the little one back into sleep. Adam watched, a sense of awe filling him. The bond between mother and child was unbreakable, and it was clear that Malira would do anything to protect her baby. Adam found himself speaking again, though he wasn't sure why. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "I never expected to be here, with you and your child, fighting to protect you." Malira smiled, her eyes meeting his. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough. It was an acknowledgement, a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next morning, as Adam stood on the bridge of the Aurora, preparing for the next step in their journey, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The galaxy was vast, and the unknown stretched out before them, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't just a captain on a mission anymore. He was a protector, a father figure in a family that wasn't of his own blood, but one he had come to love. "Captain, we've received a message from the Outer Rim." Rachel's voice echoed through the comms. "They want an update on the situation." Adam glanced over at the crew, his expression calm but firm. "Tell them the situation is under control. We'll handle it from here." As the crew prepared for their next move, Adam stood at the helm, watching the stars drift by. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. No matter what challenges came their way, he would face them head-on, with Malira, her child, and the crew of the Aurora by his side. This was just the beginning of their new life, a life he would protect with everything he had.